Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu filling in for Riz Khan. Has Big Brother gone online? Social networking tools like Facebook and Twitter not only keep you up to date on your favorite TV shows and reconnect you with long-lost classmates, they also collect significant amounts of personal information, such as what you do for a living, who you support politically, and what faith you subscribe to. With online banking, shopping, and now so-called computer clouding services like Google Docs, your whole life could become available to corporations, criminals, and government agencies hungry for your data. On today's show, we ask, is there any way to maintain your privacy on the net? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send them SMS or email, and we also welcome your phone calls on the show. Joining us from London is Alex Dean, Director of Big Brother Watch, an organization that focuses on civil liberties and personal freedoms. Here in Washington, Tim Sperapani is the Public Policy Director for the social networking site Facebook, and Ginger McCall is Staff Counsel at the Electronic Privacy Information Center, or EPIC, a public interest research center which works to protect the rights of individuals. Welcome to all of you to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim, I want to start with you and a story that's in today's papers,
Please.
Which says that U.S. law enforcement agencies are following the rest of the world into popular social networking sites like Facebook, going undercover with false online profiles to communicate with suspects and gather private information. That's a pretty serious intrusion into one's privacy, isn't it?
Well, there's no surprise that law enforcement from around the globe would be trying to find citizens where they are. In the case of Facebook, there are over 400 million people worldwide who are using our social network. We're one of just, a handful of them around the world. So it's not just a Facebook story, it's about all the other social networks. What I think is important is that Facebook is committed to ensuring that law enforcement from any country is following not only the letter but the spirit of the law. We're also committed to protecting our users' privacy at all costs.
Okay, but how do you prevent the abuse of your site?
Well, typically, we are, in the case of the instant story, we are oftentimes accused by law enforcement of knocking their undercover agents off of our site. Turns out we're very good at detecting fake profiles set up by law enforcement that's trying to get online and discover criminality if it's there. We don't believe it's abundant on Facebook at all. But we actually are really fantastic at knocking off those undercover profiles. And in fact, we've ruined far more investigations than we've aided, I think.
Okay, Ginger, do you buy that? Is Facebook doing enough?
I'm not entirely sure that Facebook is doing enough. I think that the article that I read earlier would suggest otherwise. And I think that with Facebook and with other companies, as far as their accountability for turning information over to law enforcement, a lot of times that relies on their privacy policies, which reserve the right to change the policy at any time. And I think that what we need is good, strong regulation and enforcement that keeps companies, including Facebook, from turning information over to third parties, including the government.
Okay, Alex Dean on the other side of the Atlantic there. Is that what we need, more strong regulation? In many ways, Europe appears to be taking the lead here. The European Union, for one, as part of its treaty, seeks to protect personal data, personal information that's contained in computers. But is what is needed, do we need another regulatory body?
Well, I applaud what the European Union is doing in regard to retaining data and ensuring that our privacy is maintained. But I think with respect to something like Facebook, the point I would make is I accept Facebook is not a private place. People are volunteering their data onto social networks like that in a way that you or I might not advise them to do, particularly young people, but that's something they've chosen to do. My bigger concern is with privacy in basic things like our email and our phone calls and government monitoring those things. And that's happening a lot here in Europe too.
Well, it's one thing to volunteer your information, but shouldn't one have control over who sees that information?
Yes, I agree. The trouble with Facebook, of course, is that a lot of people don't take advantage of the privacy settings that are already there. The same applies to Google. On our website for Big Brother Watch, we host some how-to guides, and one of them is how to take your house off of Google Street View. And I don't blame Google necessarily for people's inability to interact with them. But the point is, with things like Google and Facebook, some people volunteer information with Facebook or find their pictures put up on their website without their consent, like with Google Street View, and then don't know how to take them down again. And it seems to me there's a whole world of informing people about privacy that these organisations just aren't doing.
Alex has a point there, Ginger. People are not forced to put that information into Facebook. They volunteer that information, and they take the risk when they volunteer that information.
I think that's true to some extent. But the problem with Facebook that we've seen is that the privacy settings that they have are not necessarily very transparent to users. They continue to change the privacy settings so that you'll have something set so that only your friends can see your pictures, for instance. But then Facebook changes around the settings so that you have to reset who can see what, and they make certain information available to everyone broadly. And as far as turning over information that you might not have made available publicly on Facebook, there have been some instances of that. There was a poll last fall, the Should Obama Be Killed poll, and Facebook turned over the names and information of the users who participated in the poll to the Secret Service. Now, I'm not sure, you could probably tell me if that was with a valid warrant, but what we need to ensure is that when this information is turned over, there are proper protections so that there is valid legal process behind that.
Did you get a warrant?
We absolutely take any threat to life or limb very seriously. We make sure to help in exigent circumstances, those with true emergencies. And oftentimes that means real-time action. But we actually force law enforcement to follow, as I said, the letter and the spirit of the law. And that means that we're happy to aid when there is true need, but only when law enforcement complies with the dictates of the legal statute. But we will stop at nothing to help when there is real danger to human beings that we can stop. I think that's only what a responsible company would and should do.
We've heard about your privacy settings. You recently changed that. What happened? Why did you change it?
Well, we actually tried to advance the ball. We're in an age of extraordinary privacy innovation, and Facebook, I think, is leading the charge to actually giving users true control, really for the first time in the digital age, over their information online. That means actually giving them not only settings, but then adjusting those settings as we provide new functionality. A new means of communication should provide a new type of privacy to go with it that advances rather than erodes privacy. And Facebook is committed to those principles and those technological tools.
Yeah, the point was made, though, that those privacy settings are actually forcing people to share their information with more people. And in fact, the settings are under investigation by Canada at the moment, isn't it?
Certainly there have been some complaints about them, but what is in fact the case is that for the first time ever, a company has asked its users to actually stop and think about privacy. It's never been done before. So what's happened is that we have well over half of our 400 million users who have now actually gone and customized their privacy settings. Many of them, hundreds of millions of them, probably had never thought about privacy until Facebook said, stop, think about what it is you want to be sharing online. I think this is Alex's point, that companies bear a responsibility, and Facebook certainly feels one, to help our users think through the consequences of putting data online so that they're sharing exactly what they want to share with exactly whom they want to share and when they want to share it, and only that much, and only during those times.
Alex, would you accept that? It's companies that bear responsibility for that?
I do think that companies absolutely have a responsibility for that. And on the specific point that Ginger's raised about privacy settings, I have to say I'm completely in agreement with Ginger. I think Facebook shouldn't have changed settings without people's knowledge, and to the extent that that happened, it was wrong. But the other point that I would make on this is that, to reiterate, Facebook is not a private place. And particularly in situations like employment contexts, I stress very heavily to people who are looking at trying to get a job, be careful. Think about what you've got on Facebook. It is only due diligence now for any company to look online to see what your public profile, your public persona is. This is not a private place. And in response to the question asked at the top of the show about can we keep our privacy, one of the first things you've got to try and think about with a setting like Facebook is, should you put this material on there in the first place? If anything is compromising and you don't want it to be known by the wider public, don't put it up on the site to begin with.
Anand, I only have one quibble with Alex's thought, if I could chime in. We've never, ever altered someone's privacy settings without their full knowledge. We don't do that. It's never been our policy, and we never would. What we've done is simply allowed people to understand what was happening with their data. So in some senses, we've given full transparency and disclosure to things that were already happening and that we thought that our users perhaps didn't understand. That's part of our responsibility as a company. And again, we're here to advance personal privacy so people feel comfortable sharing what they want to share and only what they want to share.
Okay, lots more to talk about. We have to take a short break right now. More of our discussion in a moment. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. How safe is your personal information once you go online, and what guarantee of privacy do you have on the web? From London, Alex Dean is the director of Big Brother Watch. Here in Washington, I'm joined by Tim Sparapani, Public Policy Director for Facebook, and Ginger McCall, Staff Counsel at the Electronic Privacy Information Center, or EPIC. Well, let's get back to the questions. And Tim, I'm going to look at this internationally. Facebook doesn't just operate in the United States. You operate in many countries around the world. What control do you have over what goes on in another country?
Well, 70% of our users are, in fact, overseas, and we're operating in 70 languages. We're proud to be a communications tool for the entire world, not just for the United States, where we're headquartered. As to our level of control, it of course varies from country to country. And what we do is we attempt to provide a communications tool that breaks down geographic barriers, that breaks down country barriers, but abides by the law in the nations in which our users reside.
Well, that's an important point. You have to abide by the law in which Facebook operates.
We do. As does any other company.
Right, it brings up the case of Google in China, for instance. But will Facebook, for instance, censor something that they deem to be illegal in country X?
In contrast to other companies, we are not at all engaging in censorship. Quite the opposite, in fact. What we do is when there is a well-respected law in statute that's been upheld by courts in a particular country that says that certain content is inadmissible or should not be shared, we then will take it down when our users report it to us in those regions, but only when our users report to us. So we wait for our users to police the laws and customs of a particular region. Let me give you a good example. In Europe, in many countries, post-World War II, it has been illegal to post content that is pro-Nazi. And in, say, Austria or Germany, if a user sees pro-Nazi content or communications which are being shared on Facebook and they report it to us, we will, in accordance with the law of Austria or Germany, take down that content, but only, and this is important to stress, when our users report it to us. There's no pre-review by Facebook. We want our users to maximize their communications and their free speech on our site.
Alex, what is the situation in Europe? Would a country like, say, Britain have extrajudicial jurisdiction, say, in another country in Europe?
Well, it would depend on what the offence being alleged is. And of course, we now have a pan-European set of legislation which will mean, and already does mean, in fact, extradition from country A to B for an offence in country B. But I just want to pick up on what Tim said there. And as far as I know, Tim, and of course I may be wrong, I think Facebook does censor some things. And of course, it's not on anything like so serious a level as the Nazi parallel that you were just drawing. But a lot of free speech advocates point to the fact that Facebook won't allow pictures of mothers who are nursing their babies to be displayed on Facebook. Now, in privacy terms, I wouldn't advise people to put photos of themselves like that online. But in free speech terms, if they want to, I think they probably should be allowed to, and I don't know why they're not.
So, Ginger, what's your take on that? Which side of the divide are you on?
I think that what Tim is describing sounds a lot like censorship to me, taking down content based on what that content is. I mean, it's content-based regulation of photos or messages that are up there. I don't see how that would not be considered censorship.
That's a good point, Tim. I mean, it's a subjective decision, isn't it? As reprehensible as pictures of Nazi soldiers or Nazi leaders may be, it's a subjective decision that you're taking. You're censoring.
It is, but it's not censorship. Censorship is a pre-review of content. Rather, we respect the customs and laws and social norms of the nations in which our users reside. So, for example, in the Middle East, where many of your viewers are, where it is illegal to post an insult to God, we would allow a report to us that said that someone had engaged in such a bit of communication, and then if it were found offensive under the laws in this country, not under a user's subjective belief, we would then in fact take down that content, but only that content, not across the site, not here in the United States where all of that of course is perfectly acceptable, not in Britain or any other country. So it's not censorship, quite the opposite. It's actually abiding and recognizing the laws and customs of free people around the world.
Ginger, let me ask you this. In the United States, there has been talk of setting up another regulatory body, something that would probably work under the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, to monitor and to govern exactly how the internet works and what kind of information is made available to whom. Is that something that's going to happen? Is that something that you agree with?
I think currently as it stands, it's the FTC that regulates online activity under the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Authority that they have. As far as a new agency, I think it would be helpful to have an agency that is only in charge of internet activities of internet companies, but I think that they would have to walk a very fine line there so that they're regulating companies but not individual speech.
Okay, we got an email which came in from Germany. This is from Zeton Müller, and he asks, when you have nothing to hide, there shouldn't be any problem with the government or authorities spying on your computer. Alex, you want to have a go at that one?
Well, if you've got nothing to hide, why do you have curtains in your house? Everyone's entitled to an element of privacy, and that gentleman's statement will, in the sort of state he would like to live in, I suppose, taken his logic to the nth degree, feel very foolish when he's constantly monitored and has no longer any ability to guard what's going on in his private life. I was debating this very subject on another network recently with a member of the police force here in the UK. And he said, "You don't understand, Alex, how useful it would be for law enforcement to have monitoring capacity over all our emails and phone calls." Well, I'm sure it would be useful for the law enforcement to have that sort of monitoring capability. It would be useful to law enforcement to have a night curfew, or to ban alcohol in the United Kingdom or America, or to ban the motor car. We don't do those things because that's not the sort of society we want to live in. We want to live in a place which is bounded by freedom rather than intrusion. And that's why nothing to hide, nothing to fear is a specious piece of argument.
Tim, Alex makes the point there that, as he pointed out, it's a specious argument. But law enforcement authorities will say, look, we have a job to do. And if this helps us to do our job, if it helps us to prevent crimes being committed, why not?
We're committed at Facebook to providing a maximal zone of privacy and free speech, and sometimes these things are in tension. In my prior life, I worked at the American Civil Liberties Union, an organization actually quite closely affiliated with that with which Alex is working and where Ginger is currently employed. And I share their sympathies about creating a zone of privacy. Law enforcement has to follow the letter of the law. It can't be places where there is not already clear evidence of criminality and where they do not have yet a clear suspect who's clearly under investigation. Absent that, law enforcement should butt out. They should allow private communications to remain private. And on Facebook, those are still private. You can still choose to send one piece of content to exactly one person and only that person. I think that should be how other communications tools should operate, and I hope that will be how we move forward.
Ginger, there's another insidious practice on the internet, and that is, you know, how companies operate, companies that want to sell you things. I've had experience of this myself, where you go onto a website and you look at something, and 3 days later you've got a glossy catalog from that company. How does that happen?
I think that a lot of times there's sharing of information across companies. I think that they either make their privacy policies and terms of service ambiguous enough or long enough or confusing or legalese enough so that normal people can't read and understand them. And what you're signing up for, what you think you're signing up for, isn't actually what you're signing up for. And sometimes companies just blatantly violate their own terms of service or privacy policies and sell information to third parties.
Because in one instance, I actually followed it up with a company, and they said that they got the information from my bank. And when I called the bank, they said, well, you didn't tell us that you didn't want the information shared.
Yeah. I just got a call today on my cell phone. I had signed up to possibly view a house last Saturday, and I got a call from an unrelated and much larger nationwide real estate company asking me about my interest in house buying.
Tim, Do you think that there are enough laws in place, there are enough regulations in place to protect consumers on sites like Facebook, or does they need?
Certainly not.
No. Okay.
No, we need more consumer protection. Let me give you a good example. Facebook has drawn an important line in the sand. We will never sell your personal information to any other company. When you share your information with us, we keep it inside our walled garden, which is how we think about it. Now, we will serve ads to you based on information which we have about demographics with which you fit. So if you're a white male living in Wisconsin and your age is 30 to 40 and likes soccer, we'll send you an ad for soccer likers. But we will never share with that company your personal information. I hope that there are laws in place soon around the globe that say the selling of information should be off limits because other companies are doing it and we think it's inappropriate.
Okay, I'm going to give Alex the last word on this. Alex, as we pointed out at the outset of the program, the EU is taking the lead here. What can we see being done in Europe? And we have about 40 seconds.
People have really got to start thinking about the extent to which they should be proactive in protecting their privacy. In the end, none of our laws can do that for us. People should look at the privacy and internet settings on their own computers. They should really think about what they're putting up on the computer themselves. And they shouldn't rely on the state anymore to protect them, because in the end, no matter how many laws we have, there will be errors made and they will lose information.
Alex Dean in London, thanks for joining us. In Washington, Ginger McCall. Tim Sperapani, thank you for joining us as well. And thank you for watching. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there. You can give us your feedback on the show and post your questions and comments. On the next show, Britain has moved to explore for oil in the Falkland Islands, and Argentina is not happy about that. Buenos Aires claims that the islands, which it calls Malvinas, are colonial outposts. The two countries went to war 28 years ago over the issue, and now things are heating up again. Make sure to tune into that. We'll see you the next time.